So, first question, have you heard of AIG? So, in that context, first I want to thank Zycus for holding this conference, and secondly, I want to thank all of you, the taxpayers of the United States, for bearing with us. And what I'm going to share with you today is some of the work we've done, particularly in the last couple years. And as you may have heard, you've been getting a pretty good return on your investment within AIG. Just by background, in the very dark days, the government owned 92% of us. Now we're very pleased that it's at 15.9%, and hopefully within the next year or so be at 0. So you'll see kind of the strategy overall that AIG has done, but in particular within procurement, what we've done, basically changing the company and changing procurement. Bob Benmosche joined us as our CEO in August of 2009. The original premise that he came in on was break the company up, sell it, get rid of it, and make the problem go away. And basically the government would take a loss. What he decided to do, though, was not what most people expected. He said there's a tremendous opportunity here. And if we can seize on that opportunity and we can figure out how to maximize what we can do in this terrible environment that we are in, people, brokers, whoever, didn't want to deal with AIG. So what are we going to do? Well, we could just sell it off. That's the easy route. He decided not to do that. And so he basically challenged the employees to go and make the company better. Now, I should tell you that not unusual at AIG. I'm on my second tour of duty with AIG. I left in 2007 before it got really bad, and I came back in 2009. Now, my friends always say, why? And I never know if they're saying, why did you leave, or why did you come back? And the truth is, the company that I came back to is an entirely different company than the company I left. I left the company in 2007 for a really neat job at Moody's Corporation. However, I couldn't get things done at AIG in 2007. I couldn't change things. The culture didn't allow it. Since 2009, when Bob came in, he said, okay, we're going to emerge as a very strong financial company, and we need to figure out how to do things. Now, the truth is, we lost a lot of customers. Retention was not good. Brokers ran away from us. And so we need to build that up, and we have been very successful in, now with retention and really getting back a lot of the customers that we lost. But what we also needed to do was look at our infrastructure, look the way we're spending money, and try to figure out how to save a lot of money, procurement being one of them. Now, Bob has challenged the company to save on a running rate basis over $1 billion 4 years out. About a quarter of that he has tagged to procurement. And he's basically said, we're going to save money by procuring better. And if you think about that, an incredible task. And we'll talk about how we've made tremendous progress already there and how we're just going to exceed even what the expectations were from our chairman. In early 2010, within the procurement organization, basically what it was is we had an organization called Global Sourcing. Now, Global Sourcing, and if you've seen the maps of the United States with you have New York, and basically the rest of it is out there, that's the way Global Sourcing was. Everything was in New York, and whoever was out west or in the rest of the world, they were kind of doing their own thing, whatever that was. And some people did it pretty well. Some people didn't do it. Some people were not sure who they were dealing with, whatever was going on. And the nature of the company was it was a federation. Literally, there were over 100 company presidents. Company presidents of all shapes and sizes. Some of the companies had 15 people in it, but they were a company president. The company president could do anything the heck they wanted. They could decide what they were going to buy. They could sign contracts. They could obligate, in some cases, even the corporate AIG if they wrote the master agreements wrong. And they did. And so we're now faced with a situation that we have all these very powerful folks who could do things, and we're coming in at corporate and we're saying, okay, we're going to change things a little bit. So the company itself, we had a 90-year history, and the issues within AIG, as they were, and we've got some of them still going on, and we're fighting them as we go. We had P&L challenges. Our revenue, to some extent, because of premium pressure, we couldn't go and, as the market might dictate, raise some premiums because customers were already a little shaky with us, and if we were raised the premiums too much, they might flee. We had a history of inefficiencies. Because we had these silos, people in many cases could go and buy their own technology, do their own thing. I was in Japan about a year ago, and we talked to the procurement folks, and they very proudly told us that they have 8 different suppliers for PCs. And we said, okay, well, what do you buy? Well, we buy kind of whatever is there. I said, well, how do you do this? Well, we kind of call around, and we want to spread it because we don't want to be relying on one vendor. And I said, well, do you really need 8? And we said, well, what about service and stuff like that? Oh, we got service contracts, individual service contracts on them all. And they were very proud about this. And we said to them, well, what would happen if you used the corporate agreements? What corporate agreements? And so what we found out is for things like HP and Dell and so forth, they were buying and they were paying prices beyond what we had as a corporate agreement. So not only did they have a lot of suppliers, which is a problem, what they were buying, they weren't even paying the right prices for. And so we began taking notes and saying, okay, well, obviously we have a problem that they didn't know that we had these corporate agreements. We also have a problem in that the suppliers obviously didn't tell them. And you might say, well, how could that happen? Well, it happens. Sourcing was never viewed as strategic. It was viewed as a problem. It was viewed as order takers, guys to get in the way, guys to simply, I want this and I want it from that guy and I don't really care that he's my uncle. And we had situations where we've always dealt with this guy, why do we need to do this RFP? It is just so terrible. We don't need to do it. And then the final thing, which was very obvious when we had a number of these changes coming in, is supplier diversity using minority-owned or woman-owned suppliers and sort of the social responsibility aspects of that really was just not done at AIG. And again, let's think of the environment here. We were what we called one angry congressman away, because all we needed to do was to take all the federal money that we were taking, get one congressman upset with us, and say, by the way, when you guys buy your things, who do you get it from? And we had a very bad story on that front. And so we're worried about that one angry congressman. Hopefully we're already going up so that we don't need to worry about that like we used to before. So basically what we did is we began looking around and how are we going to solve this thing. We basically brought a new team in, including myself. Now, I have about 8 years with AIG. I've been in procurement only for 2. The rest of my career was basically being a chief financial officer for different areas of Citibank and AIG. And so basically we brought in a new procurement team. From the chief procurement officer, the entire management team is been there for less than 2 years. And we basically looked at everything that was going on. We looked at the people, we evaluated the folks, do we have the right people, the right skill sets, and so forth. Looked at the processes, there really weren't any. Looked at the technology, very fragmented. Brand, again, global sourcing, those are the order takers. And we basically said, okay, we have a lot of issues. And as I mentioned, it wasn't global. And so what we needed to do is pretty much go through and figure out what we are going to do and then communicate it. And an organization as large and diverse and as troubled as AIG has been, not an easy task because a lot of folks were just trying to get their businesses realigned, and all of a sudden we're doing this sourcing stuff. And the things that people were worrying about, they didn't want to worry about sourcing. They just wanted to figure out how they were going to underwrite the best that they could, how they were going to acquire policies, and do claims very efficiently. So we went through, we had a lot of focus groups, we did a lot of cajoling to get people to talk to us, and we just looked at the size of the task, and we basically said, okay, we can do all this stuff, and then the challenge came in. We need you to do it quick, because if we put in the element of time, take out the element of time, I should say, it would have been a lot easier. But because we wanted to go through and get to the point that we basically are now, we're independent of the federal government and going that way, we needed to really move fast and get things done. So in the last 2 years, we've done a tremendous amount of things. Okay. So the CPO and senior management, I report to the Chief Procurement Officer. He reports to the Chief Administrative Officer, who reports to our CEO. If you just think about that, I am on the org chart, and believe me, I have no delusions. I am 4 down from the CEO. I can get to the CEO if I need to get to the CEO. I can extremely easily get to the CAO. And that's totally different. Procurement used to be down here someplace. And it has risen to the point of a strategic partner with the businesses. And that is really key. And pretty much the CEO has talked up procurement when he's done town halls. We've been out there, all the CPO and my peers have been out talking within the organization what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we intend to improve things. And we're not there yet, but really what the vision is. And really beginning to move the parts around. Now, part of the situation that we had is we had these little pockets of sourcing throughout the world. We had a person here, a person there, and if you've been through this view where you start looking at where people are, immediately they scurry like cockroaches. So somebody who was doing sourcing and had it on their business card as sourcing manager someplace, all of a sudden he ends up being operations analyst. And so what we needed to do is to figure out, okay, so you're telling me you have no sourcing people in the United Kingdom. How do you buy things? And asking questions like that and figuring out who does the contracts, looking at the contracts, and then going through and trying to figure out who's really doing what to whom. Now, I hadn't mentioned at this point the word savings. Now, savings, as you all know, is kind of the benchmark and really how any procurement organization starts with measuring itself. So, we began trying to figure out, okay, savings, okay, well, there's kind of rules that people have, and we ask around, how do you do a cost reduction or a cost avoidance, and we got 18 different stories. And so then we started talking to the finance folks. Well, what do you do with this information? Oh, I recalculate it. I can't trust anything that comes out of you guys. And so, well, how do you calculate it? Well, I do this and this and this and this. So what we ended up doing is we wrote a series of guidelines and basically said, okay, here's the rules of the road. And then we went around to the different finance folks throughout the world and said, okay, here's the rules. You guys got any problem with that? And some of them did. We fixed it to the extent necessary. Had the chief financial officer of the company bless it. And so that's our rule. So the discussion on how we're calculating things and all that, we have to look at the deals and try to fit them within the guidelines. But the exact same thing, it's very reproducible. And that has been huge for us as far as getting the guidelines set and getting it so that it all works together. We began putting in a number of e-procurement tools. In Japan, as an example, Japan still does a lot of its purchasing manually, on paper. They pay bills by writing out checks. And when I say writing out checks, I mean writing out checks. And so just doing some level of automation. We have these silos. I'm not going to use procurement, I'm special. A lot of that going on. No, you're going to use procurement. It's required. The other thing, as we began putting a process together, is the whole thing of engaging sourcing early. You know, we have a number of our clients who would say, okay, here's a contract sourcing, can you execute it for us? Well, you can't negotiate very much when you already have the contract. And so we've shown real value to our clients as we've been out there on if they engage us early, how much they really will save. And you know, the numbers speak for themselves. The whole contracting thing, it takes forever. So we've been going through doing templates and things of that nature to move it along. Really, really important so that the clients have an idea of what to expect. Of course, the backdrop is we have, whenever we do policies, we have the United States government to deal with. So not only do we have the normal constituencies, any policies that I was putting out, I had to get approval from the United States Department of Treasury. And it adds an extra element on trying to explain why you're doing things. We'll leave it there. So the global organizational alignment, just getting the people in, I talked about that a bit. And as I mentioned, AIG was going through such incredible transformation. This was a company that was so adverse to change going back about 4 or 5 years ago. And before I left in 2007, a number of senior managers say to me, I consider success when I can stop change. And if you think of that, and you think of how powerful that was at the time, the change has taken place. Those senior managers are no longer with the company. So it has moved on. But you know, we've gone from a siloed federation, very loose federation, to a center-led organization. In other words, it's surely recognized throughout the globe that Global Sourcing and Procurement Services is the owner of the policies around procurement and sourcing, and basically the place you go if you want to get value on doing the things. We consolidated a number of functions, just putting them together to get synergies, so that it ended up being one stop for whoever was going to do sourcing and procurement. And then finally, accountability. We took responsibility. We said we weren't perfect. We said we had lots of issues. We said that the process as it's been has been pretty messed up. And we said we're going to change it. And so as I said, we laid out this wonderful timeline, and as always happens, as it goes to every level of management, myself included, the time frame got shortened, the scope got increased a little bit, and we said do it and get it done fast. So the way we did this, and these are kind of the first things that we did, is we began engaging with the businesses throughout the world. Again, just very quickly on structure of AIG, there is AIG Corporate, and we have a number of subsidiaries that have a bunch of companies and whatnot, but the two principal businesses that we have are property and casualty for corporate, which is right now branded as Chartis, and a financial group which includes American General Life, which is called Sun America Financial Group. And so we began engaging with them, and we began putting people embedded within them to get them, if you will, to be working with us. We issued an acquisition policy. Well, what is that? AIG did not have a policy up until March of last year that said you needed to get 3 bids. You know, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted, provided you kind of were able to explain what you did. So we got very prescriptive. We said things like 3 bids. We said if it was above a certain dollar threshold, you need to go to global sourcing. Different things on just making sure you had a contract that had certain key things. Having to get a non-disclosure if there's any level of confidentiality. And again, let me just talk about non-disclosure, just to give you a sense of kind of where we came from. I'm authorized to sign non-disclosures. There were 5 different non-disclosure forms that we had. They all had different things. And so I would look and I would be trying to figure out why this particular non-disclosure was good and there was no rationale to it. So we simplified it. There is one non-disclosure form that we use in the United States now. And it is far easier for everyone because the people in procurement were going nuts. Do I use this one, or the other one? And it would really depend on the business that they were dealing with. And if you think about it, a non-disclosure should have nothing to do with the particular business entity. We set up a 5-step sourcing process. And basically, this is a pictorial that we're able to show our customers, here's where we start, here's what we're going to do, here's where we're going to finish. Again, makes it nice and straightforward both for our customers as well as our folks themselves. We put in a lot of infrastructure. There really was none. Everything within savings, pipeline, spend analytics, absolutely nothing was there 2 years ago. All the reporting, all the dashboards, all those kind of things, absolutely nothing existed. Vendors and contract databases. Kind of the rule was you should put it in the contract database, but if you don't, just make sure you keep a copy. And hopefully you will stay with the company forever and remember where it is. And so, as we began looking at this stuff, we said, okay, well, who are our vendors? And that ended up being a bit problematic because we didn't know. And when we started looking at contracts, we found out we had numerous master agreements with the same vendors that conflicted each other. And that by itself is very problematic because we would always go towards the one that's advantageous to us. The vendors would go to the other ones. And so we've been going through a process of trying to rationalize all those things. And so, the main thing we were trying to do is figure out what we had and make sure everybody understood it. So one of the things that we introduced last year was spend. Now, AIG, by the nature of the way it grew up, does not have one ERP system. Even in the United States, we don't have one ERP system. We have SAP now for Chartis and AIG Corporate, a different SAP system for Sun America Financial Group, and in the rest of the world, different general ledgers, accounts payable, some homegrown, some not homegrown, some we don't even know where they are, and some are there. So our Zycus setup as it is now has 40 feeds coming in every month. And part of the fun, and I use that in quotes that we've gone through with Zycus, is if you can write down every type of data problem that you would imagine, duplicate records, hidden characters, missing records, so on and so forth. We had them all. And we're to the point now where what we're getting out of the Spend Data Warehouse is reliable. And we can actually go and as I get questions and whatnot, as there's an incident someplace in the world and someone says, do we deal with those people and how much do we deal with them? I can tell you pretty well what we've got. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, if you want to look at the universe, you really start with spend because you don't know about that contract that's in someone's desk, but you know if you're writing and spending money, and we can go back and prove it off to the financials of the company. And so that's what we've done. We've taken Zycus, if you will, as being, if you will, the trailblazer on figuring out where our spend is and therefore who we're dealing with. And so now we're trying to figure out why do we have all these suppliers all over the place. And we're also finding out that a lot of our multinational suppliers don't even know that we're dealing with their subsidiary that's in country, which is pretty interesting. When you start telling the suppliers things they don't know. It's always been the opposite way around. They would tell us stuff, and we'd go, really? And now we're beginning to tell them things. And so the whole dynamic is changing, and negotiation is able to change quite a bit. So part of what we're able to do is a lot of our contracts have rebates, credits, and things like that when we hit certain thresholds. If you imagine the way we were a couple years ago. So, Mr. Supplier, have we hit that threshold yet? No, not yet. And they're always honest. They would never, never lie. Well, now we can look at stuff and we can say, we're spending an awful lot of money with you. I think we're about to that threshold. Can you check? Oh, yeah, you're right. Because it's very different. And now we're also able to, say, we're there, even if we're not 100% sure. They know we have data. They know what we're doing. And so they're not sure that we don't know. And so it ends up being a little bit of that type of thing. We have a lot of engagement now with our suppliers. What are we buying? What are we buying from you? We're now going through some work with Zycus on our technology vendors in particular with resellers. When we deal with the Dells and the HPs and the IBMs of the world, we buy some of it direct from them, but most of it we buy from resellers. And when we negotiate our deals, we really need to know what we're doing globally for these contracts. Very tough, and what we're going to do is we get feeds already on what we're spending with these resellers, but we're going to get detailed feeds on what we're buying. And so we can go to Dell and say, by the way, here's what we did. Instead of when we enter a negotiation with the Dells of the world, by the way, what did we spend with you guys? And it's basically where you don't want to be is where we've been. Savings and pipeline. One of the things that is kind of the mantra around the place is if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. And so savings, we know what we save right now, and it's quite a bit. We have strategies, we have forecasts, we have all those kind of things. Things that you would expect that we've never had before. So on just going through some of the things that we've done, technology, mentioned that before. We've mandated that common tools will be used throughout the place. We've introduced concepts like reverse auctions. If you're not familiar with reverse auctions, I can explain it a bit later, but suffice to say, with the e-discovery, which is looking at litigation documents and whatnot, we did a reverse auction. The law firm said, what are you, nuts? You're doing a reverse auction? Yeah, we did. And we saved 38% by going through doing those type of things. So we're looking at using our tools in all different new ways. Now, sustainability, not from the point of view of environmental sustainability, more from the point of view of how we're able to sustain what we're doing. So it's people, organization, process, and technology. I've talked about those before. And then adjunct to those, we have supplier diversity, vendor governance, which is something that's very important to us since we're now under regulation of the Federal Reserve Bank, and PSS, which is Procurement Shared Services. How are we getting out to the rest of the world is we are doing a business process outsourcing with some buy desks out in different geographies where people who have never touched sourcing are all of a sudden going to be engaged with us. Metrics, very, very key. Something which we haven't had before that's very important that we do. But also our people, very important to engage our people and make sure that they realize the value. Vendor governance, totally new thing to AIG. We did not know who our suppliers were. We had different people talking to them. There was no system that tracked them. All those kind of things. Now with the Federal Reserve in, it's their requirement that we know who we're dealing with, what we're buying from them, who's buying it, what our controls are, and what are looking at the risk associated with all our suppliers. So that's something that is totally new that we've stood up in the last year. Supplier diversity, I mentioned that before. We've more than doubled the supplier diversity spend percent in the last year. And I mentioned before the outsourcing. And our savings, which again is really one of the most important things into a sourcing organization, you could see the increases. We've gone 61% in the first year, 65% in the second, and this year we're up to about 48%, and my information as of after these slides is actually a bit higher than that. So we've been bringing basically, if you will, the money to the bank for the company for the last few years. This is a quote which is kind of similar to the Bob Ben-Moshe quote. Basically, if there are bad circumstances and so forth, you basically look at the opportunity that you've been given and you develop what you have. And that's pretty much what our organization has done and we're going to continue to do. We've still got a ton of work to do.